This is D.S. Yaxheim versus another edition of The Spectre, and I'm going to giving you my take, my review of Child's Play, the 1988 movie that started the whole franchise. It's about a doll that's possessed by a serial killer. And the serial killer is named Charles Lee Ray. It's played by Brad Dourif. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think most notably. It's a really good movie with Jack Nicholson and from back in the 70s, but I'm not talking about that movie. Basically what happens in this film, it's hard to even talk about. It's not, the other movies are more campier and funnier than this one. This movie builds suspense. You don't really see Chucky, the possessed doll who's possessed by the serial killer, in the film. In the beginning of the movie, of course, he runs into the toy store. I mean, many people who are horror films have seen this movie, because probably, if you're watching this video, you've probably seen it. So he goes in there and uses an ancient incantation he learned from this guy that's into voodoo, who's later he visits in the film, much to his detriment, and he's the police officer. He's a serial killer. He's a criminal. He's running from the cops. He's running from one cop. He's only running from one police officer. A detective played by Chris Sarandon goes into the toy store, and there's this really popular toy or popular doll marketed towards young boys, and it's called a good guy doll. Back in the 80s, they did market. There was one called My Buddy, which is kind of similar to Chucky, other than it didn't talk. But it was marketed. It was very, very similar to the commercials featured in the movie and all that. So it's kind of where part of the inspiration for Child's Play comes from. So he uses this ancient incantation to transfer his soul, because he's dying, he got shot, to Chucky and to escape. So he does this, and then, of course, loses the cop. The cop sort of witnesses all the crazy stuff that happens, like there's a storm and lightning hits and all this crap and explosions and everything, but it's sort of like, okay, well, that's fucked up. And then later on, a mother, played by Catherine Hicks, who really wants this doll for his kid, but she's a struggling single mom, and how that goes. How that goes. This is what happens when you don't have a strong father figure for your kid. You substitute it with a possessed demonic doll. And so Catherine Hicks goes home. Her name's not Catherine, it's actually Karen Barclay, goes home and gives her young son this doll for his birthday, because he's just really, he wanted it and all that. And he totally happy about it, but things start getting weird. Andy starts saying weird stuff and says Chucky says it and blaming things on Chucky, typical possessed doll business. Really, when it comes down to it, that's what they do. Just ask the owners of, used to own Annabelle. But this movie's not, it's more like Annabelle than the other movies, in that you don't see Chucky that much. You see from a first-person, point of view, kind of like Michael Myers in Halloween in the beginning, when he's the kid and he goes and gets the knife and stabs his sister. That's sort of what Child's Play is. The first one is, that is. And So he basically uses, and he wants Andy. He wants to possess him so he can get out of the doll body. That's Chucky's whole motivation after he gets into the doll, is to get out of it. So hey, I mean, the kid's perfect conduit, So perfect way out of this jam. Just pretend to be a kid and grow up, So, but his second chance wouldn't be had so easily. I mean, the kids, once the mother figures out that something's up with Chucky, after a woman, I think it's her sister, right? Shit. So anyway, gets thrown out. I think it's her friend. This is why I should have rewatched it before. I've seen this movie several times. But anyway, the woman charged with babysitting Andy after he got his new doll, she gets thrown out a fucking window because Chucky, she's not taken with the dolls, taken to the doll too well. She doesn't like the doll, so she takes I think Chucky takes a hammer and beats the shit out of her with it, or stabs her, but she fucks her up. He fucks her up. She goes out a window. Actually, one of the movie posters features the outside of the building where they live and the woman getting thrown out. So that's that. So after this happens, because Andy wears good guy, clothes, the clothes, the shoes and everything, it leaves kind of a footprint in the kitchen. So they think, oh, that must be Andy because it couldn't be the doll who wears the same shoes. It's the kid. And the mom's like, oh, she's fucking desperate, and they have shrinks looking at the kid, and the cop that actually followed Charles Lee Ray into the toy store at the beginning of the movie really doesn't believe her until he finally encounters Chucky later on. And you think it's just a doll, just like kick it, beat it. I mean, this doll can fuck people up, but but you think it'd be easy to beat it, even if it is possessed by a person. It would be, still easy, to kill something and beat something that's like 2 feet tall and all of that. But as I say this, I have this guy lurking behind me. But yeah, so anyway, throughout the film, so the kid's seeing a shrink. They think he might have killed his aunt. I believe this is his aunt or his mom's friend. It's the one thing I don't because I haven't seen it in quite a while, but I've seen this movie quite a few times over the years. Watched a lot of the sequels. So the kid is seeing a shrink, and they think that the kid murdered somebody because Chucky made it look like that. Of course, then again, kind of doesn't work for Chucky because the kid's locked up somewhere else. So anyway, Chucky goes and looks for the kid, tries to track him down. And the mom goes home and picks up the box Chucky came in, and the batteries fall out. And then she pops open Chucky's battery compartment on his back, and then the head turns around and says, "Hi, I'm Chucky, I want to play." And she drops it and freaks the fuck out because she knows that the doll has been doing all this without its batteries. And some of the story that her son told her seems to make sense, however crazy it is that Chucky's actually been telling him things and doing all these things around their place. So she's trying to convince this cop most of the movie that look, she's desperate, like any mom, any parent would be in this very unusual situation. So tries to convince her that Chucky is this is possessed or whatever the fuck's up with this doll. They don't know, but it's doing things on its own, and it's sentient. So and Chucky does crazy things in this movie though too. Once Chucky actually kind of you start to see him more within the second half of the movie, he fights with this police officer, like just the cop, police detective in the car, and fucks him up. The car flips up. This whole crazy stuff happens, and Chucky's fucking this guy up. He's real dangerous. Chucky can pick up a gun and use it, and he's just all this horrible shit. So they got one fucked up, crazy doll on their hands to deal with. in this movie. Just it's you know, it's not just in their house like a possessed doll doing weird stuff. It's on the streets. It's looking, you know, it's planning. It's, you know, trying to get inside, trying to transfer its soul out of the doll body into Andy's body so he can be human again. Because the more he stays in the doll body, the more human that becomes, I guess, and the more he bonds with it. That's what the voodoo guy said before, of course, he killed the voodoo guy. And there's so the voodoo guy, I don't know his real name, shaman, one of those. So anyway, the final showdown for Chucky in this movie is, of course, which is one of the best scenes in all of these movies. Anyway, I mean, the movie, it is. I like this movie a lot. I think it's a good little horror movie. It's fun. It's a silly premise, but it takes itself enough. You know, I mean, it builds suspense, and it's you know, really it's more. It is. It's like any first horror movie. It's just better usually than the other ones because you can't build suspense in the sequels, and there's just a lot of crazy subplots and sequels and things like that, and just dumb shit they put in there to try to make a sequel work. This doesn't need that. So it's just basically, you know, the mom and this police detective and the kid versus Chucky. Usually they all deal with Chucky mano a mano at one point in the film, and then they all sort of have to deal with him later on their own. So Chucky gets pretty fucked up in this movie. Once Chucky realizes he can't manipulate Andy as well anymore, he's got to speed up this whole thing and get out of this doll body. And when the police detective, of course, finally believes this, because he sees, you know, when the doll tries to kill him, he, you know, goes to the apartment. They're both sort of, the mom and the, you know, police detective are working together to stop Chucky, and you know, because Andy's in danger. And back at their apartment, they fight Chucky. I mean, just horrible. Just, you know, the mom takes Chucky to the fireplace and threatens to set him on fire if he doesn't talk at one point. And then, you know, he like, you crazy bitch! And then, like, fights her, and then finally, you know, he finally kind of reveals himself to her. And then at one point, yeah, they do. The kid does set Chucky on. Yeah, I think the kid does set Chucky on fire when they're in the fireplace. Turn the gas on, and you know, he's just pissed. He's done with this stuff. You know, just the whole friend to the end. That's what he says. And so, anyway, he burns Chucky. He sets Chucky on fire at the fucking fireplace. Still, I'm burned alive. You know, I mean, it's like he's not gonna move. So Chucky kind of runs out of the fireplace. There's like a cage over it or whatever. Chucky runs out of the fireplace on fire, which is pretty fucked up. And then, you know, Chucky gets burned all to hell. They think he's dead. He gets the fuck back up again. And then the police detective just shoots at him, shoots his arm off, and then, you know, starts just blowing him away, and I think shoots him in the heart, and that's what kills him, or in the chest. And even at the end of the movie, it kind of implies that Chucky's still alive. The head's, you know, on the floor. To leave it open for a sequel, and it's just a really, it was a twisted little movie for the time when it came out. It really was. I mean, there was all these other horror movies. It's towards the end of the decade. It's like '88. There was, like, you know, the Friday the 13th, Halloween, bunch of bad sequels, and the Nightmare on Elm Street. So they've all been pretty much played out at the end of the decade. Then this is like the new horror villain of which was going to keep going for the next 30 fucking years. But but it was like, it was different. It was a little new. It was I think that's why it did so well. Why it still endures, because it was a very 80s movie, but it's still a cool 80s horror movie. And the sequels, I mean, we would go out to see in high school, go see like Child's Play 2 and 3, and they were just increasingly bad. The second one was really terrible. Andy was in a the mom was the plot of the second one was the mom wound up in a psych ward, and Andy wound up in some group foster home, for troubled kids, and he's all fucked up. And another one of the a doll that was rebuilt, they somehow took Chucky, and rebuilt him, reconstructed him like fucking Frankenstein. And he, of course, went after looking for Andy again to get revenge and get possess him. And the third one, Andy's grown up, and not grown up, but he's like older, late teens, and he's in military school, and then after it's like Seed of Chucky, Bride of Chucky, or whatever, onward, so on and so forth, because they made sequel after sequel of these movies, and they just got increasingly horrible. Curse of Chucky was okay. I thought that was like at least decent. It was kind of like the original in that it was suspenseful, and they kind of you didn't have, it wasn't, I mean, and it was official canon off of the last one. They didn't just say, oh, like parts 2 through whatever 6. They never happened. It's just Curse of Chucky was okay. I thought it was pretty. It wasn't like like a great film, but it wasn't bad for a Chucky movie. It was above and beyond, I guess. But it wasn't as campy or comical as the sequels were. But the first movie's, I think, still arguably the best. There's a sequel. There's another sequel after Curse of, was it Cult of Chucky? That's right. That was fucked up. They're worth seeing. The other ones are just, total just campy garbage, and I mean, there's, he's, it's beyond fucked up and sick, but they're just solely made just to be horror comedies, and the first one I wouldn't say falls under that category. Obviously, it's just like anything. If it is successful and it's in the horror genre, they're going to beat the living shit out of it and just milk it for all it's worth. And that's what they did with Child's Play. And it's the same thing with Halloween. The first one was good. Fans loved it. Fans hate all the sequels, but a horror fan will see a bad sequel to a horror movie, and filmmakers know this. They don't have to worry about it necessarily being good or the story or writing being necessarily compelling. So that's kind of what happened with these films, and they tried to, with Curse of Chucky, they tried to kind of did fix that. They did. After that many years, of course, they're going to have to make something that breathes a little new life into it, or brings back something that was good, and tries to reintegrate that into the franchise. But still, the movie, I mean, if you're going to watch any of these movies, if you're going to watch, you don't need to watch like the 2 through, I think 2 through maybe Seed of Chucky. I don't know if there was Bride of Chucky and then Seed of Chucky. So in those movies, you don't really need to see any of those. I would probably jump to, but see them. I mean, see them for what the fuck they are. I mean, but they're entertainment. I can't really sit down and like watch all those sequels. They're beyond awful. They're like, they're all about on the par of like Halloween 4 or something, or Um, but yeah, that's my overall like take on Child's Play. It's definitely like a B plus, A minus. Maybe I'm putting a little too high up there. Horror film. At least one that was commercial. It was made by MGM. I mean, they put it out. They're actually the MGM's rebooting it. They're gonna reboot it again and do a remake of the 1988 movie, not like a sequel or anything like that. They just, as they often do, and I mean, Halloween, the new one's coming out this well, it's not necessarily a total reboot, but whatever, but that movie is taking Halloween 2 through H2O or whatever, the two canons that are already existed there, in addition to the Rob Zombie canon, which is 3, if you really can put that in the reboot. That's 3. All those are wiped out. It's just basically the very first Halloween 1978 movie and this one. It's like 40 years later, so. So that's. But with Chucky, it's the sequels are so messy, and they're so ridiculous, and just you almost feel like you're you need to take a shower afterwards after watching them. They're just that bad. You just feel like it cheapened you in some way. I don't know, but because the humor is bad, the jokes are bad. It's just everything's just really not that the writing was stellar in the first Child's Play movie, but it basically serviced the story and the characters and everything for the type of movie that it was. And it's like anything, it gets kind of dwarfed by the sequels, or sullied or ruined or whatever in some way, shape, or form. It just eventually that happens, and like people always tend to always hang their hat on the sequel to the first movie of any franchise like this and say, well, that was the best one, and they're probably right. I mean, there's some movies, there's definitely sequels, like the Evil Dead movies, and that's a different kind of, that's very independent film compared to Child's Play, but the sequels were at least decent. I mean, the second movie was like a remake of the first movie, and Army of Darkness was like basically supposed to be part 2, but it's a good movie, and it's just basically it's with independent filmmaking. I mean, they are answering to people. I mean, there's money involved. There's people even in like small independent movies, but they had freedom to do what they wanted to do. Because Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell both worked on it, and you can when you watch especially the first movie, you can see like, wow, there's a lot of freedom and liberties they had to make this horror movie. They didn't, it's not like anything I've really ever seen before. And even Child's Play to some extent, the first one, it was kind of, it looked like it was like a little bit of a risk taker, because it wasn't a big, like a Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers coming in and killing people. It was 2-foot doll possessed by a serial killer. So it was different, and I think that's probably why the movie worked so well at the time, because there really wasn't anything like it in theaters. And basically, I think that's my overall take on Child's Play. I think it's a great flick. I've watched it a number of times over the years growing up, and it's still the best one of them. And I like older horror movies better, and maybe it's just because the ones that I grew up with and before that, because they really it's, I don't know if it's like fine wine. Certain horror movies age with time, and like new horror movies they're just very cliche. Over the years, like from the 90s on, it's very the same young people going on some road trip in a van or whatever, and they get lost, and they go to the rundown gas station with the attendant that looks like he's like from the, you know, Sloth from Goonies or some shit. And so, but yeah, that's overall what a lot of horror movies that I've watched, you know, they all sort of seem to take they all sort of take that route, because it's they're marketed towards usually younger people, and they have younger people in them, and young people go off on road trips, and they just usually don't get killed. But yeah, that's kind of what happens to most horror movies, because they're very cheap to make, those kind of movies. Child's Play wasn't probably as cheap to make, because it involved like an animatronic puppet and all that stuff, and a lot more effects shots than a lot of the other just standard run-of-the-mill slasher movies. But that's my take on Child's Play. If you have any thoughts on it, feel free to leave it in the comments below. My name is DS Yoxheimer, and this has been my movie review of Child's Play.